Good evening! So before Camp Nano starts, and I have to do daily vlogs on that, I had promised a video earlier, a couple videos back, on like fears and insecurities of being a writer. I know this topic's kind of been done to death, but I haven't seen these particular ones come up for some reason, and I don't tend to identify a lot with the other ones that people bring up. So I thought maybe I'd go over these ones in case maybe you're feeling the same way, and go over a couple tips on how I figured out how to kind of deal with these things and move past them. The first one of mine that I tend to have a problem with, and this has to do with Camp Nano a little bit, is the fear of getting started on a new book after you finished the previous one. Now this might not be the same kind of fear that some people talk about. Some people talk about the fear of being afraid to start because they've never tried writing before. Mine is more the fear, because I didn't really have that fear when I first wrote my first book, mainly because I was fueled by anger at something my hubby said that implied he didn't believe I could do it. So I didn't have time to be fearful of it. But I tend to get this fear before I start a new book after the previous one I did, because I got real attached to the characters in my past book, and I have this horrible fear that I'm not going to get attached to my new characters in the same way, and that I'm not gonna like the new book. I'm gonna be like just trudging through it even though I'm not enjoying it. One thing that I found that really helps me with this, if you happen to also be having that problem between books or stories that you're writing, is doing an outline. I know that's like the answer to everything allegedly, but I find that that really helps me because it starts getting me amped for those new characters, and doing some character development sheets. It starts getting me really excited about the new story, because I really had this feeling after I finished the draft of Peace and Peril that I was working on, and now I'm moving to book 1 from book 3 in the series. I know it's all out of order. And I was like, I'm not gonna like this as much. I'm like, I know this story is gonna have a character that's like this, and it's gonna have a character like this, and I'm like, I'm not excited to write them. It's just not gonna be as good as the other one, and I'm scared to start it because I don't want to have to do it. And then I started doing some character development sheets, and I started doing some outlining, and I started getting really into my characters and the story itself, and it just got me amped. Like, I am so excited now to start writing this tomorrow. In fact, I kind of like sort of started today. I like wrote the first paragraph of my first chapter today. And I'm so excited. Plus I also came up with this awesome way of like how I was going to describe the characters' looks, which apparently anyway, I'm not going to get into that. But as you can see, I'm very excited now, and it's because I did the outlining and I got to know my characters and the stories, or the story, a little bit ahead of time, so that I know I'm actually going to enjoy writing this story. So I don't have to have that fear anymore that I'm not going to enjoy writing it as much as I enjoyed writing the last one. The second fear that I tend to have, it kind of couples with the first one, and it has a little bit more to do with like the end of Camp Nano, sort of. I have a fear of finishing the book. I've described this in past videos where I always, on like the last couple chapters, I like can't get through them. I'm like scared to death to finish it, partially because I feel like I'm gonna have to say goodbye to those characters. I'm gonna have to move on to the next story, which means I'm gonna have to deal with that fear of starting a new book versus the old one. And it's that feeling, everybody knows this feeling, you guys know this feeling. It's that feeling like when you get to the end of a season of a show that you've been really addicted to, and that's the final episode they're not gonna have anymore, and you know that, and you get that, well now what? Like, what do I do with my life now that this is over? And that's what it feels like every time when I finish a book. So I have this like built up, pent up fear about finishing them, so I don't want to, and I have to really force myself through those last couple chapters. Not because I don't have the climax figured out, which is a lot of people's fear of the end of the book, is, well, what if my climax isn't good enough, or they just don't like their ending, they can't figure out what they're gonna do with their ending, so they're scared of finishing it. Nope, that's not my problem. My problem is that I'm afraid of not getting to write it anymore, which is a little silly. But one of the things I found that helps with this, at least for me, and if you happen to experience this too when you're writing, is to have a plan as to what you're doing right after that, so that you know it's not over right after that and you won't have something fun new to write. You might be moving on to another work, or you might be diving right back into editing. And for me, it's a little bit easier if I'm diving right back into editing, because I'm like, I'm not having to let go of them yet because I'm gonna be working with them still. And still adding some more chapters here and a scene here. And that kind of helps negate that fear a little bit and make it a little bit more tolerable. The third one that I want to talk about, and I actually do think I have seen this one mentioned before, so this one I don't think I'm very special on, is the fear that I'm going to run out of good story ideas. Now, some people have this fear for other reasons, and I totally get why they're kind of afraid of that, because they're afraid that, oh my gosh, they're going to use up their creative well. Mine is a little bit more of a, I'm afraid I'm going to go into writing withdrawals if I run out of ideas, because at this point I've been doing this for about a year and a half, like literally every day, and I like legit get cranky like I'm having withdrawals when I don't get some writing related thing done every day. So I'm a little bit scared that eventually I'm going to run out of ideas and have written all my other ideas that I have written down and planned out. And then I won't have anything to write, and the only thing I'll be able to write if I want to write is some generic redoing of something, which I don't want to do. And I'm a little bit scared of that. Now, how I kind of comfort this fear, because there's not really a cure for it, because theoretically you could actually run out of ideas. It's unlikely though, because you're getting exposed to new stuff on a daily basis and on a regular basis, as long as you're not being a hermit. And that kind of stuff will spark ideas and put more information in your brain, which your brain will fidget with, and then you'll just have these brilliant ideas that pop up occasionally. It's doubtful that unless you're like amazing at getting like every single story out lickety split, that you're gonna run out of ideas before you come up with new ones. And even if you run out of it for some period of time, that doesn't mean you're out of it forever. That just means you're out of it until a new idea comes up. And that could be literally like a day, weeks, months, whatever. Part of that comes down to, and I'm sure this is mostly what other people have a fear of, is not necessarily that they're gonna run out of ideas, I can't talk today, ideas, but that they're gonna run out of good ideas, or ideas that they're actually passionate enough about that they would want to write, that's something they would want to write about. So, I mean, I don't have a lot to say on that one. It's just, it's one of those things you gotta kind of just take on trusting your brain to come up with new things, because your brain is amazing. It's gonna come up with ideas eventually, but if you force it, it's gonna end up being one of those a watch pot never boils things. And you just gotta kind of relax, maybe go out, do some things, get some fresh input for that gray matter in between your ears to work with. Maybe watch some interesting shows, maybe read some interesting books, stuff. Obviously don't like rip things off or have it be heavily inspired by things, but you know, it's just, it'll all like kind of mix around in there and give you ideas. It's kind of amazing how that works actually. And like I've mentioned before in previous videos, sometimes you'll just get awesome ideas from your dreams. So maybe try sleeping? I don't know. But that's my my third one. The fourth fear that I have is the fear that I didn't plan enough, or that I'm gonna write myself into a corner because I didn't plan enough. The reason I kind of have this fear, and I'm sure other people have this fear too, that's why we've got people who are like addicted to outlining and never get started on the actual book because they're just too busy outlining, and they're afraid to start because they are too scared that they're not prepared. For that, I would encourage you to just go ahead and dive in. You're probably good. But with this, the reason why I kind of have this fear is because on my first book, I didn't outline. I thought I had outlined, but what I did is I just did bullet points, like for events that were going to happen throughout the story. And at some point, I got way off course, and I had to scrap, oh gosh, what was it? I want to say like 5,000 words, which, considering I had only written like 6,000 words so far in that story, that was discouraging. That felt like I was like having to start over, essentially. All I had really was my first chapter, and I had to basically completely backtrack because I got myself stuck in this weird ping pong ball situation where characters were going to this location, then back to the other location, and back to this one. I was just like, oh God, what'd I do? Anyway, that's why I have that fear. And how I found that works really good for me is that I don't do just a bullet point outline anymore. That didn't work for me there. I can tell just from how my second book went that it would not have worked on my second book either. And I can tell from this new book, since I have outlined it to the point where I basically have 9,000 words at this point in the outline, that would not have worked for this book either. I would have missed a bunch of very important things that would have caused the story to get off track at some point, and I probably would have had to scrap some stuff to be able to get through it. And I don't like that. So what I've taken to doing to fix this is that I basically do a summary of the entire book by chapter, scene by scene, before I start writing. That way I know everything that happens. I know kind of the characters, and I have a bit more of their development down so that they don't take me on random road trips during the middle of the book, which is what happened in my first one. And I found that that works really well for me. The other thing, if you don't want to do that, which is totally fine, if you're like a pantser or a discovery writer or some sort of in-between person, that's just what works for me. One thing I would suggest, if you do have this fear of writing yourself into a corner and you are a pantser or something, kind of goes along with my previous fear. You will figure it out. Maybe you need to give yourself a little break. Maybe you need to not force it, because it's one of those watch pot never boils thing, like I mentioned. You got to give your brain some time to think. Mel Robbins in the 5-Second Rule talks a little bit about good kinds of procrastination and bad kinds of procrastination. And you're probably thinking, good kinds of procrastination, that's not a thing. But no, she talks about creative procrastination, and it's actually a necessary part of the creative process, because it gives your brain a chance to kind of work things out and figure it out and mull it over, and then you'll have a creative outburst. So if you do find yourself writing yourself into a corner, one, you can always take a step back, find where you went wrong, and then kind of figure out a different direction you can go to avoid that problem again when you write back through that part. That's one thing you can do. Two, you can just keep trying to trudge along if you want to give your brain a little bit of a chance to think of a solution to the fact that you're in that corner. I don't know. Maybe you have magnetic boots and that corner has metal walls and you just start walking up the corner. I don't know. That was a bad idea. That was a bad example. And sometimes you'll come up with stupid ideas like that when you're in a corner too, where you'll be like, oh, I know, a clown will come out of the closet. I don't know. And you'll regret that later. That's okay. You can always fix it in editing. That's okay. Don't panic. And if you think you're getting into a corner, don't panic either. Maybe just slow down for a second, take a look at it, figure out where you started feeling that way, because that's probably where things went wrong. If you have to take a step back, take a little bit of a step back. If it's during Camp Nano or NaNoWriMo, I would suggest maybe just, this is what I do because I've found this happen a lot. You don't want to cut your words because you don't want to lose your word count. What I do is the moment I realize I need to go back and I need to change this to something else, in the text, I put some little things, some brackets, and I just write, need to go back and change this, and then I proceed with the story as if I had already gone back and changed that, and then I keep going. I don't keep writing it the wrong way. As soon as I realize it's wrong, I just put in text, assume I changed this back at this point, and maybe put like the chapter number or something, and then I keep writing the story as if that thing had already been changed, and then I fix it in editing. So that's another tip that might help you with that particular fear. You can always do that. So there's a couple of ideas for that one. Fifth thing and final thing is actually something that's been talked about a lot on these kind of videos, but I want to kind of give my own little twist to it. So that's the fear of failing as a writer. Now, a lot of people, when they refer to failing as a writer, and these, I'm going to set this up right from the beginning. This has to do with whatever your goals are. You're going to have your own personal fears and things that you qualify as failing. I'm just going to go over what the normal ones are that I hear and kind of what my own are, because they're a little different. But most people, when they say that they're afraid of failing as a writer, they cite things like they're afraid they're never going to be professionally published or traditionally published. They're going to get a bunch of rejection letters. They're afraid that if they are published, they're going to not be able to make their deadline. They're afraid that they're never going to be as famous as J.K. Rowling or something. They're afraid that they're not going to be able to make a living on their writing. Now, none of those are my goals, so I don't have those particular fears. I don't plan on traditionally publishing, and even if I did, I always have self-publishing as a backup, so I'm not particularly scared of getting rejected. I don't have a goal of making a living entirely on my writing because I like having a stable paycheck and a normal job. It also keeps writing more as a fun thing where if I do well, cool, but if I don't, it's not like I'm gonna starve and I'm gonna lose my house. And I don't care about being famous. Dear God, do I not want to ever be famous. That would be my worst nightmare, actually. I used to sing as a kid and people would ask me, why don't you go on American Idol or whatever? Firstly, because I'm realistic and I know I'm not that good, I'm just okay. And secondly, because I'm like, oh dear God, have you seen what happens to famous people? They all end up dead, like from a drug overdose or an STD or something. Hell no, I don't want that life. So I would never want that. My main goals, which tend to be the things that dictate what my fears are of failing, is my main goals are to reach each, on a smaller level, each goal that I set for myself. So my own set goals, because for example, this year I want to get completely done with the first and second drafts of my 3-book series that I'm working on. Now that's a pretty high order for myself, but I've thought it out and I think I can do it. And if I don't manage to do it, I'm going to feel like a failure because I failed myself and the expectations that I set for myself. And I also at some point thought it was a reasonable expectation. So if I have to take a step back, that's going to be disappointing to me. The second thing that I would consider a failure to myself, because my goal on a larger scale is to write enjoyable books that people like, that people get to the end of the book and they say, wow, I really enjoyed that. I hope for the next book comes out soon. Not so much because I hope that they just keep buying my books, but more because, and this is kind of sad, I just want to know that I did a good job. I just need that little pat on the head. That's kind of pathetic, but like I crave to know that I did something good and that it wasn't total crap, you know? And I don't particularly care if that has a connection to money necessarily. If it does, awesome, way to go. But I just, like, for example, the other day, and I'm gonna try to keep this short because this video is going way long. Somebody at my work who I gave a paperback copy of my second draft of my book came up to me and I was like, because this is a person who does not just give you like empty compliments. Like her job at work all day is to tell you you screwed up. And she's very good at that. She came up to me and she's like, I had given her the book like the day before, and she comes up to me and she's like, I am a third of the way through your book and I am loving it. And she was just like, so, like that's how her face looked. She was just so lit up. And what was really awesome to me is that she was talking about my book and making the same facial expressions and the same excited tone and stuff that she was talking about her favorite book series a couple days earlier when she was explaining this one book series that she's like, these are my absolute favorite books, I absolutely love them. And she was talking that same way about my book. And that was the most rewarding thing on the face of the planet. And that's the kind of stuff that, to me, if nobody really enjoyed my book to that level or my stories to that level, that's what I would consider a failure, because I live for that shit. Anyway, I'm gonna try to wrap this up because this is going way long. One thing that is something that can help if you happen to have fears of particular failures. Now, everybody's gonna be different, so this is kind of hard for me to personalize as far as advice on how to help yourself with this. It's to remember that failure and success is largely a numbers game. I know you probably don't want to hear that. You don't want to hear the whole spiel about, well, just keep picking yourself up and keep going again. But it's amazing, especially when you look at so many people who are successful or were successful, how many times they failed miserably before they finally got what they were after. Or how many times they had to maybe reassess their goals and realize that whatever they were setting for themselves just wasn't the right goal for them. Not necessarily that they had set themselves too big of a goal, because I really do think that no matter what your goal is, barring like weird crazy things like taking over the world or something, if you allow yourself enough time and you do have that perseverance, you can eventually get there. I mean, you have the chance to, but you're gonna have to put in the work and you're gonna have to do it. I know you don't want to hear that, but it's true. Again, back to the fact that it's a numbers game. If you look at people like J.K. Rowling, everybody always references her and her crazy getting published story about how she had to submit to a ton of editors, or sorry, not editors, agents, and nobody wanted to pick her up. And then she finally got picked up by one on a weird, crazy circumstance. But another one that I really like, and I recently heard about in one of the Mel Robbins books that I was listening to, was Kevin Hart. Apparently Kevin Hart had to audition and do shows like 3,700 and something times or something like that before he got picked up for something that he was aiming for. So yeah. So as she put it in that book, she's like, I don't want to hear you complaining, essentially, until you beat Kevin Hart's record. So kind of tough love moment there. But really, it really does come down to a numbers game. As long as you got something that's good, you can always keep improving on it. Even if it's bad, you can keep improving on it until you can hit your goal. And sometimes it's a matter of you're just not, it's not a you're not good enough. It's the you're not good enough yet. You just need to put some more work in it. And that comes into, you have to have a growth mindset. You have to know that, hey, maybe I can't do this right now, but I will be able to do this if I do this, this, and this. And then go from there. Sorry, that's a little bit nebulous, but everybody's going to have their own different goals and their own fears that stem from those goals and what they consider failure. So I'm trying to give something that's a little bit, not necessarily vague, but something that can be kind of used in different things. Anyway, this video is super, super long, and I apologize. I'm gonna let you guys off the hook. Tomorrow's Camp Nano. I'm super excited, and we're gonna do that. And I'm gonna have daily vlogs. That's one thing I'm afraid of failing at. Anyway, I will talk to you guys later. You guys have a good one. Night.